Hey there everybody, Eric from Outer Limitless coming at you today with another video. Now behind me here, the Ikuby Medium Carport. Today's going to be a how to assemble video, beginning to end, some tips and tricks and the little things that I learned along the way while I got this set up. Now you can go with a very basic setup. I tried to go a little bit beyond that because I want this to be a semi-permanent shelter. Ikuby will tell you this is not a permanent shelter, but I do anticipate a long duration test of this through the winter months, through the adverse conditions. So for me, I needed to beef things up just a little bit. So what we're going to do, we're going to go through this in detail. Again, I'm going to take you through this beginning to end. I'll show you all the little nuances. But with that said, I have a whole bunch to do and a whole bunch to share with you. And if you're interested in seeing a little bit more about what I'm about to get into, do me a favor, stay tuned. Now, before we get too far, I would like to say thank you very much to the people at Ikuby who did provide this for review. And so before we get started, I do need to premise this entire thing by saying I'm not actually going to park a car in here. You're going to have to do a little bit of research to figure that out for yourself, what kind of car you have and what might fit in here. For me, this is going to be more of a storage shed. I'm going to put some equipment in here, I'm going to put some firewood in here, and this is going to be a long-term duration test. So I'll have this in adverse conditions. I'll go through this in, I guess what I'm going to say, beginning to end setup and talk to you about how I set this up, why I set it up the way I did, and how this got to this point. But before we do that, I kind of want to show you this ahead of time so that you know what your target is by the end of this video. So just in general terms, before we get started, I'm going to show you what this looks like so that you can think about your setup before you even get going. There are some things worth considering, and it's not really all that obvious when you look at Ikuby's instructions. So a little bit of forethought ahead of time will go a long way. Now, first off, what you're pretty much trying to do is get these spreader bars attached to this bottom post here. So this sort of bracket that goes along the bottom, well, this is the base. You'll notice that I opted to use some 2x4s and build myself a level area because I do anticipate keeping this out here for a long-term duration, and I wanted something that was secure. I also wanted a little bit of airflow because I will have some equipment in here, and I will also have some wood in here, and I want everything to stay dry. The main hardware you're going to be considering is on the bottom. Everything else goes together pretty much with these little clips, and they press together very easy. The actual tarp itself does attach to the poles with Velcro in most areas, and you do want to pay attention to the fact that you will need to get this Velcro underneath that bottom bracket by the end of this. So just keep that in mind and plan ahead. The other thing worth noting is they give you mounting hardware that can go on here. I opted not to use it. Rather, I drilled some holes and I put some screws, deep screws, down inside all the way into the 2x4 to spread out the load across this entire thing because I do feel like this is going to be a little bit targeted by the wind. And last but not least, when you get into the tarp, there is a central seam that you're going to want to pay attention to. That central seam runs all the way down the middle. This is going to help you get this centered when it gets to that point. So keep in mind the fact that this central seam runs all the way down to the front and to the back. You have locking and lashing hardware on both ends. So another thing to pay attention to. You can add these if you want, and just little things that are going to help you along the way. So with that, let's get into the setup. Now in general, this does come with what you would need, simple tools, all the hardware I'm opting to use my own 10mm wrench, so an open-ended and boxed wrench, 10mm, and then also a 10mm socket on an electric driver. That should save me a little bit of effort. Step 1, place the bases in approximate location. This should actually go on site where you're going to put the carport, but in my particular case, I do plan on moving it. I have some preparations to do, so this will move, and I'm going to try to be careful doing so. But in the meantime, leveraging some cardboard just to keep things from getting damaged. So that's step 1. Step number 2, leveraging parts MC-R002 and 003. Now in the box, they do happen to be actually the parts that are flipped around. If you look at the name tags, these are flipped around versus everything else. So they lay out the boxes very well for ease of use if you take your time. I suggest leave everything in the wrappers. I suggest leaving everything in place. Usually I would kind of rip all the packaging off, but in this particular case where everything's nicely labeled, we'll leave it like it is and I'll deal with it as it comes. But for now, 002 and 003. So now you can see you got these bolts in place. What I opted to do was put the bolt on the outside, nuts on the inside. It'll just be a little bit cleaner. Now my particular kit did come with washers, and I opted to put the washers on the nut side. The nuts themselves have a little bit of a ridge, and I didn't want the ridge to dig into the paint, and I figured that washer would hold everything down and flat and nice. So that's working out well. Now at this point, left and right hand side really will matter. So if you notice, the parts are marked L and R, indicating left hand and right hand side, so get yourself set up accordingly. Which for me, I do have my left hand assembly and my right hand assembly as I work towards this. MCL004 and MCR004. You're going to connect these in the middle, leveraging that pin going through these holes. Very simple. And then same on this side, leveraging these holes. And then with this pin here, which is attached to the base frame. So you can see on this side. Now with this connected, we're going to leverage the longer screws, and we're going to basically bolt this piece here, so on the angled bracket, to this piece here on the other side, and that's going to make this a rigid frame. And you can see now with this bolted together, making this a rigid frame. But one of my impressions is you can do this as a one-person job. It's just awkward and a little bit difficult, so having a second set of hands would come in handy. Now we're going to make up a whole bunch of assemblies of MCL005 and MCR005. And so very simple, my left hand and right hand side assemblies, again, just putting these together with that simple pin, popping these into place. Now moving forward, these are the bars that are basically going to go into these holes. So you'll see, getting these inside here, we're going to bolt everything together, 5 on each side, so 5 basically on each side, both right hand and left hand side. And these are clearly labeled MCL001 and MCR001, right and left hand side. So after doing the first one, I can tell you should probably work from the outside in. Reason being, if you start on the outside, then you can lay the bar down, do the next one, lay the bar down, do the next one, lay the bar down. At this point, this bar does want to come in this direction, which obviously will get in my way, and after a while, it's going to be a little unwieldy having these things hanging up in the air. So little pro tip, I would start from the outside and work your way in. You can see now all the arms bolted into place. Very simple. The other thing I like about putting the sort of bolts on the outside and then the nuts on the inside is that won't leave anything sharp for the canvas to rub and get cut over time. If these were sticking out, the canvas might potentially rub and fray, but where these are on the inside, I think that'll work out a little bit better. You can see I did bolt these down. It does pinch a little bit. It's gonna rub a tiny bit, but that's not gonna be a big deal over time. I think that'll be just fine. I don't see any concern there. So now you can see with the frame put together, this is pretty much ready to go into place. Now, in theory, you probably don't want to put the very last one on because you will slip the cover on and then assemble the final pole. However, I did that so I can get exact measurements. I need to know the exact length of this. I need to know exactly where the corners are going to land, and I have some more planning in this project. So in order to get those measurements, I did put this on for the time being, but it can come off easily. The other thing I did is I know I need to move this, so I am going to zip tie all of this together so it's good and secure while I move this into place. But at this point, the frame is pretty much assembled. I would say for this project, you need roughly about an hour, and 2 people would definitely make this easier and go a little bit quicker. But not a big deal with 1 person, you can certainly do it. Round 1, 10 hours. But that's pretty nice. And for tomorrow. So the reality is, with the cover, this is tricky. It's not difficult, but it's just tricky. There's not a lot of good information in the instructions, and so getting this oriented in the first place is just a little bit tricky. But what you're trying to do, I'll give you some tips. You have this central seam. As you take a look at the fabric, there's a central seam, and that runs all the way to the middle, from one end all the way up over the top and to the other end. So if you can get that seam centered, you start to get the fabric more managed. You'll also notice that there's these seams here. Well, that's Velcro on the inside used to attach to the poles and the spreader bars. So if you can get these perpendicular, then you're moving in the right direction. Furthermore, you're trying to get this pole inside this sleeve, and where it turns the corner, and you'll see it goes to the straight part, which is also in a sleeve. Now my suggestion is get these poles into the sleeve first, and then after you do that, connect up your U at the end. So that U part that's at the end. And if you do that, these should go in very easy, and then you can clip up the end without too much difficulty. So that's my suggestion. I did that on both ends. So both ends now are exactly the same. So I know I have the length right, I know I have the layout right, everything working now to my advantage. My goal now is to get all of these around each one of these poles in the proper order. And then the last thing I'm going to do is, well, I already screwed down my frame. So what I need to do is just loosen up my screws, sneak this Velcro underneath this bar, and that's going to tighten everything up and secure this down against the bottom of the frame. But I'll do that last. And you can see a couple areas where I'm going to do that. So here and here, and then on both sides. So I'm going to do that off camera, and I'll come back and show you the results. So now everything nicely into place. You can see here these Velcro straps underneath the frame. Went very easy, and everything now again screwed down nice and tight. You'll notice I wanted to go with the screws to keep good even pressure all the way along, and kind of, I'd say, distributing the stress. If the wind gets under this and blows, at least it's got 10 spots along this where it's evenly connected. That's the case for both sides, so both sides done. You'll notice now as I go to close the top, just grabbing on here, pulling this side down, everything comes down, and a nice enclosure. Now you can see all the Velcro in place, holding everything nicely to the bars. That's also the case on the vertical. So you need to get these vertical ones too. Very straightforward. You'll notice that there are vents, and the vents are situated in the middle of the structure on both sides. Very tall, good height overall. I'm 6'1". You can see ample height, even with my arms stretched out above my head. Plenty of room, so this is a nice size shelter. Good amount of space here. My arm span also beyond 5 feet wide, so good amount of space here from side to side. And you can see very easy. Now again, this is a tricky build. It's not difficult, just a little bit tricky. So you kind of need to take your time, just be patient. Probably easier with 2 people versus 1, but definitely something, if you're working by yourself, you could absolutely do it. Now what I think is going to make this ideal as sort of a shed and or wood storage is the ability to open this all the way up. If it's a nice sunny day and I want to dry things out, open it all the way up, let the sun beat in there, and then by the end of the day, close it back down. That's going to be awesome. Or the ability to load this up. Very simple, get this tarp up and out of the way. Just make sure you understand and buy yourself the clearance towards the back end as the clamshell goes back down. But the ability to raise this completely out of the way, that's going to be a great advantage. I like this design quite a bit, and I think this is going to be an overall nice enhancement to my yard and my overall ability to keep things managed. And so there you go, guys, the Ikuby medium carport. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that was helpful. Thank you very much for following along, and if you like this content, do me a favor, take a look at my Outer Limitless 2 channel, which is more on the tactical and firearm side of things. At this point, that channel is growing quickly. I have a ton of videos up there, so if you like what you see here on Outer Limitless, do me a favor and check me out on Outer Limitless 2. So alright guys, thanks for stopping by. I hope you like what you saw. I hope you found it a little bit informative. If you like what you saw, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Take care now. I'll see you soon.